Today we are still in the Birch Bark House. We're still in chapter 9. We read the first part of chapter 9 yesterday. We're going to finish that out today. Don't give up. It was Angeline, her voice gentle and kind. You are doing very well, Neshime, little sister. Amakias looked at her big sister in surprise, then gratitude. Nothing felt as good as this unexpected kindness from Angeline. She wiped her tears away and took up her beadwork again. So if I remember from what we read yesterday, Angeline was kind of gently teasing her about wanting to learn to bead. And so not in a cruel way, but just kind of as a sister. And it really, really hurt Amakias's feelings. And then Tin Snow was kind to her. So now Amakias is working on learning how to bead, and she's getting frustrated because, like with anything, you have to learn. She can't just jump into it and it's perfect. And she's getting frustrated. And now her sister is very kind to her and telling her not to give up. And it kind of surprises Amakias, but then she's very thankful for it. We know that she looks up to Angeline, and so now getting this encouragement from Angeline when she's feeling so frustrated made her feel really good. Niwo was napping in his little blanket hammock just above them. Dede had tied 2 ropes into holes in the wooden beams, and between the 2, he'd fastened a warm blanket into a hammock. Mama could rock Niwo by moving her foot, tied to one of the ropes, or Amakias could swing him by moving the other end of a rope. The sky darkened. Pinch was sent out to bring wood. He made a face at Amakias, for with her beadwork, she was set apart. Another of the women and Pinch was left to fetch wood all by himself. So here we see Pinch is still kind of spiteful, kind of nasty. He's no longer with Amakias as far as like being a child. We're seeing some growth in Amakias now. Instead of just being another child, it's now to fetch wood, do the chores. She has grown some and it's been acknowledged, and now she's doing the beadwork and she's kind of doing those more grown-up chores. And Pinch is not happy about it because now he's the only child left that can do those chores. Dede and Fishtail sat in the corner, talking low and thoughtfully, drinking Grandma's tea. Soon they got up and left, for they had decided to try their luck with the fishing nets let down through big holes chopped in the ice. They went out the door, talking louder the minute they were outside. There was a little space of quiet around the women, all together. The time seemed just right to ask Nokomis for a story. Windemu washin, Daga, Nokomis, Amakias asked. Tell me a story. What story do you want to hear? Wendigo, said Pinch, returning, his arms stacked with wood. Are you sure you want to hear it? Nokomis growled deep in her chest, showed her sharp teeth. Wah! Pinch's eyes rounded, but his grin was full of excitement. He inched closer to Nokomis and tried to shush baby Niwo, who had awakened. Niwo could wiggle out of his cradle board now, at last, and was learning to walk. He pulled himself along by grasping shoulders, clothes, hair, anything to keep upright. When eventually he plumped down, he showed his pleasure by trying to bang his stick doll to pieces against the side of the hearth. So we're also seeing growth with Niwo here. He's no longer just stuck to his cradle board, wrapped up like a little baby. He's got some freedom, just like any other baby. As he gets older, he's learning to walk. He's more independent. Gego, Amakias said, but her voice was gentle as she showed Niwo how to dance the doll instead of break it. Pinch! From outside, the men were calling him. The big men! He clattered down the wood, jumped to his feet, and ran out the door. Being called by the men was better than a story, even a Wendigo story, any old day. Once again, the women and Niwo were left alone. Now, Nokomis said, I can tell you an old story about my grandmother. She looked tellingly at Mama. You know the one. Gidget, said Mama, only half teasingly. Do you think they're old enough to hear it? I was 8 winters old when it happened, said Grandma. Same as Omakias now. So here we know that Omakias has gotten older. When we first started the book, if I'm not mistaken, she was 7 winters, and now this would be her 8th winter. Then tell it, Omakias begged. Yes, tell it, said Angeline. Tin Snow put down her work for a moment to beg, laughingly, along with everyone else. We remember from the beginning, right before Day Day's story, that Omakias had wanted to ask Nokomis to tell a story, but said that she wouldn't. Nokomis only told stories kind of in the winter when the mood was right, and that is how we ended up with Day Day's story. So now, for the first time, we're getting to hear a story from Grandma, from Nokomis. Grandma's story, Fishing the Dark Side of the Lake. When I was just a little girl, said Nokomis, her voice lilting high and dropping low, her voice far away, I was told by my grandfather, who I lived with, who raised me, never to fish the dark side of the lake. Why, you wonder? I never knew that either. Never found out until, of course, being a young girl and very curious, I took my grandfather's canoe out one day while he was sleeping. I put my fishing spear and nets in the canoe. I would fish where the water was deepest, strangest, bluest on clear days, and blackest on the cloudy days. That's where I paddled. I had a stick and line. I lit that down, baited, and I waited to see what sort of fish I would catch. The wait was long, my grandchildren, and as I fished there, I grew uneasy. I remembered my grandfather's warnings, the way he insisted that I was never to approach this deep water. I'd seen him looking out there, sometimes at sunset, his eyes sad and clear. Sometimes he mentioned my grandmother. She had gone away young, I knew that. Not much more. Her favorite food, he said, was fresh plums. She could stand beneath a plum tree and eat all day, he said. When he said that, he smiled. Fresh wild plums. I had taken dark red plums with me. As I sat in the boat waiting for the fish to bite, I put them slowly, one by one, into my mouth. What was wrong with this side of the lake? I had to wonder. Except for the depth and darkness, it wasn't much different. I would find out what was different, I decided. I kept my line in the water. My bait must have been wrong, though. My bait must have been no good. I didn't get a bite, even a little nibble. Maybe, I thought, Grandfather told me not to fish this dark side of the lake because no fish lived here. That would be a joke on me. Just then, I looked over the side of the boat and I spilled all the rest of my plums into the water. Sah! I was disgusted. Down they went to the bottom. Not long after they sank from sight, though, I had a strong tug on my line. Then, not just a tug, a real pull. Soon I was struggling to keep from being dragged overboard. I had caught something very huge. A hand reached out of the water, pulled itself up my fishing line, finger over finger and fist over fist, until suddenly the beautiful face of a woman appeared. She looked up at me and kept climbing. Do you have more plums? She asked. I said no, but I helped her into the boat anyway. Her hair was black and endlessly long, covering her, and underneath it she was naked. Her smile was gentle. Her skin was purple, gray, cold, the color of those plums. There was something familiar about her, something awful and yet familiar. I was very much afraid and began to paddle quickly back to Grandfather. Still, I was a curious child. Who are you? I asked as we traveled along. I am your grandmother, she said. Here's what happened. Long ago, I married your grandfather. We could not be parted. We were like one person, he and I. He was stingy with me. After I bore our first child and lay her in his arms, after she grew for a year, I became my daring self again. I became again the wild girl he'd loved from the beginning. One night, I dared him to swim with me in the lake. We went out in our canoe to the deepest part of the lake, the darkest and the coldest side where you have found me. We threw off our clothing. I dived in deep as I could, pulled my way down, down, until I reached the bottom. My dear grandchild, that's when I got lost. It was so dark down at the bottom that I got turned around. I could not find my way back up again, and so, tired, I curled up in the cold weeds and I went to sleep. Until now. My grandmother looked toward the shore. Her face glowed in the twilight. I saw, as we approached, that she was watching my grandfather as he came down the path from the camp to the edge of the lake. He walked closer and closer. Something strange happened. I rubbed my eyes. I passed my hand across my face. I could not believe what I was seeing. As he approached, my grandfather's step seemed to pick up life. His hair got darker and darker until it turned the pure black of his youth. Lines disappeared from his face. He straightened his bowed back. Just as our canoe touched the shore, he smiled. And oh, my grandchildren, suddenly he had all of his teeth. I got out of the canoe. He looked upon me kindly, said goodbye to me, and then he took my place in the canoe with his young wife. The two gazed into each other's faces with great happiness. I watched the two paddle away together into the darkness, into the night. Two shooting stars passed over through the sky. The lake was silent. I never again saw my grandfather, but eventually his clothing was found on the shore, washed up on the dark side of the lake. When Nokomis finished, no word was spoken. Amachias could say nothing because stiff hairs prickled at the back of her neck. She couldn't get the sight of that hand reaching out of the water from her mind. Tin Snow and Angeline were wiping tears from their eyes. Mama sighed and continued her work, slowly, carefully, on Angeline's shawl. So to step out for a second, it seems like this story had a big impact on the family. And thinking of the story itself, trying to figure out what it is about, I could infer or make the connection that this story was about death, about passing to the other side. Nokomis was in the deep side of the lake and met the spirit of her grandmother, and who was very, very sad to have been parted from her grandfather. She explained what happened. And then as they get closer to shore, her grandfather starts coming. So we could infer that that part of the lake is where they pass into the spirits. And her grandfather was ready to go. He walked to them, he met them, and joined his wife. And she never saw her grandfather again. So to me, that story is a story about death and passing into the spirit world. And it seems to have had a profound impact on the women. Amachias is feeling kind of creeped, I guess, stiff hairs at the back of her neck. Tin Snow and Angeline wiping tears from their eyes. And then Mama just kind of sighed and continued her work, very focused. So it seems kind of like a subdued, maybe kind of sad, maybe kind of heavy atmosphere after this story. Picking back up though, Mama sighed and continued her work, slowly, carefully, on Angeline's shawl. Perhaps she was thinking of the big gathering where Angeline might meet someone and go away with him, far from her mother's gaze. Although she didn't want that to happen, it was inevitable, and Yellow Kettle's fond look said all that was in her heart, how deeply she loved her children, how dear they were to her, the center of her life. So Yellow Kettle, Amachias' mom, knows that Angeline is reaching that age where she might meet someone and she might start her own family and she might go away with him and away from her mother. And her mother doesn't want that to happen deep down. She loves her children. She wants them here with her. And even though she doesn't want that to happen, she knows it's inevitable. And we can tell from the way Omakias's mom is looking, even though she doesn't want her to go away, she does want her children to be happy. So again, we're seeing growth in the children here. Omakias subdued from the story, Angeline growing and possibly preparing to leave. And Yellow Kettle knowing that that's going to happen, and she wants her children happy, of course, but it is going to hurt her when Angeline moves. Being naturally cheerful and bold, though, she soon grinned and joked. Yellow Kettle could not help turning the mood her way, and soon everyone was laughing over Niwo's tumbling and Andeg's playful squawks as Niwo followed him and grabbed for him. Andeg knew how to stay just out of reach of those chubby, curious fingers. So now the mood is lighter. It is more playful. Yellow Kettle kind of broke that somber, serious mood. She started kind of joking and laughing, and then they all started laughing at baby Niwo as he's walking and trying to catch Andeg. So the mood has lightened now.